So joining us today is Dr. Paul Monaghan. This is his official photo. There are none other on the internet except this one.
That's right. And it's an old one too. That's why I keep it.
Oh, you look the same. You look the same.
It's a younger man.
Paul is a professor in the IFAS Agriculture and Education Communications Department. And he is faculty also in the center that I'm faculty in, which is the Center for Land Use Efficiency. He is known for his expertise in social marketing, community-based social marketing, and he likes to combine community-based research with social marketing as a tool for environmental behavior change. And his projects have focused on health and agriculture, health and safety in agriculture. And when I put on my safety goggles to do my lawn work, I do think of you, Paul. And and reducing the environmental impacts of residential landscaping. And I've had the pleasure to work with Paul on a few projects, namely our rain barrel success program here in Alachua County. And Paul really helped me to frame that and understand what was going on with people adopting rain barrels and hopefully predict what their future outcomes of environmentally friendly landscaping would be in their yard. So without further ado, Paul Monaghan, we welcome you to the State Master Gardener webinar.
Well, thank you so much. You can all sit down now. Please, everyone sit down. It's always a little weird to do these webinars without seeing you all there, but I know you're watching. As I try and get my screen shared properly, I will tell you my favorite plant is the only one I can grow. A couple of years ago, I started buying papayas at the store and then putting the seeds in my compost pile. And everywhere I use that compost, I have wild papayas, and they're 10 and 15 feet tall. They grow year round in North Central Florida through the freezes, and they produce tons of papaya. It's the craziest thing. If I'd tried to grow them, I would have failed. But so wild papaya is my favorite plant.
Cool.
My backyard's full of them. So I'm gonna hit share screen. Oh, that's not what I want. And again, Wendy, you're my backup on this. What about that? Can you see that?
Not yet, Paul.
Let me go back to my, so tell me again.
So you're gonna hit the green button that's share screen.
Yeah.
Click on that, and then you're gonna find where your PowerPoint is open, and you're gonna click that option.
Desktop and share.
Right.
Yeah, it's just not.
Okay, no worries. We'll go with mine, and you'll just have to let me know when you want it in advance.
Okay, no, I apologize for that. I can see it on my screen, but.
Yeah. I'm gonna have to figure this out though. Bear with us all, because I can't get that microphone to go away. And so I'm gonna need to switch screens on that maybe.
Try one more time while I'm doing this.
Well.
Oh.
So there it is, but I've got that microphone icon on there that I can't get rid of. So I would like to get rid of that. So I'm going to stop share. And Paul, if you'll try one more time, I'm going to hit escape over here. Any suggestions there, Emily?
I have never seen that before, so I'm really not sure.
Emily, how can I switch my switch my monitors?
If you right click on your desktop.
Okay.
And it'll come up with like
display settings.
Yes.
Okay.
Is that
Wait a
volume
minute.
button always there for you, Wendy?
Okay, I think I got it. I think we're gonna be able to do this.
Okay.
Nope. Nope, I'm not. Okay. Emily, I'm gonna send you Paul's, you
Okay.
think it'll work?
I can try.
Okay. It's all right.
And you're still not saying mine, huh? That's
Nope,
weird.
it's okay. All right. Are you all seeing my email box?
No, no one's sharing at this point.
Okay. Okay, Emily, here it comes. Otherwise, we'll just deal with that weird thing in my screen. Thank you all for hanging with us. We're just doing the best we can here. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Okay, all right, I'm gonna try one more time. Guys, I think I figured it out. Emily, don't kill us. And we're off.
I have to
Nope.
say, this is a new issue, Wendy. We have never had that record the volume button before. So
Nope, we haven't.
okay, so it's currently in notes mode.
For Paul,
Mhm. Okay.
oh, Marty said it went away.
All right, so no one's sharing now.
I just shared.
And tell me what you see. Do you see my slideshow, or there we go?
Oh, did Paul was Paul able to do it?
No, we're viewing your screen, Wendy.
Okay, and the microphone's still there?
No, but we're seeing it in the notes mode, not in presentation mode.
Oh, I'm not seeing it that way. Okay. All right, let's try it one more time. Oh.
So
How about still notes mode?
Yes.
And now?
it's advancing.
And is it still in notes mode? Yeah. All right.
Yes, it's just in the PowerPoint work mode.
Not quite sure what to do.
Yeah, I wonder if I should try
Again, Paul.
again.
And everybody, thank you for bearing with us and for,
This is
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, we know we can click the presentation icon, guys. It's just it's not selecting the right screen. So it's not selecting the presentation. It's not selecting it in the presentation mode. So she's presenting it, but not, Zoom is not selecting the right screen.
So when I hit share screen, I get a bunch of options: desktop, Microsoft PowerPoint. And if I
So
click-
select PowerPoint.
And when I do that, I get allow Zoom to share your screen. It says open system preferences. And when I do that, then nothing happens. So or if I hit share, nothing happens.
And-
Just
Let me,
doesn't-
let me see what we do over here. I'll try one more time. Okay, so that's in notes mode there, right?
We're seeing your desktop now.
Okay. And now,
Now we see it in work mode, PowerPoint work mode.
Look at that. I think it's there. I see
And now we see
the
it.
slides.
But we see that volume thing. So we're just going to deal with it with the volume.
we're just
thing.
going to deal with it with the volume thing. So everyone, please be as patient as possible on that. Dr. Paul Monaghan, would you please give us your presentation?
Yes, now I'm ready. Now I'm really ready. So this is part of a certification program that we developed in Southwest Florida with some regional agents and extension agents and specialists in Gainesville. And the whole program looks at better stormwater pond management, everything from a design to nutrient control to wildlife. And basically, if you know, the stormwater ponds are filters for our stormwater system. And a lot of homeowners don't realize that the water in their street, the things that they put in their lawn that go into the gutter, that does not go to a water treatment plant. And there's often a misconception that all that water gets treated. But it turns out it goes right into their backyard, into their stormwater ponds. So we've developed a program to educate pond managers, but also HOA managers. Anybody who would these days has to make more and more decisions about how to deal with stormwater ponds. And what I'm going to talk about today are the people aspects, because as we know, all landscaping issues kind of boil down to behavior and social norms. So Wendy, I'll ask you to advance, and I might get you to skip some things. So let's advance. Let's go ahead and go one more. I think this will be a picture of me. We've seen me already when I was only 20. What I want to talk about today is really, can we change social norms? And so these, whether you deal specifically with stormwater ponds, they're all landscape issues. So it has to do with nutrient management. It has to do with turf management. It has to do with what your neighbors and your HOA expects of you. So these issues, why I've kind of focused on stormwater ponds, they're broadly applicable to just about everything we deal with in landscaping problems. So Wendy, if you'd advance. And what I've found, and in most of my research, it's social norms, kind of broadly defined, really affect how we accept our landscape, what we like about it, what we think our neighbors like about it, and then whether we're going to change and make our landscapes more sustainable or to use less resources. Social norms are going to play a big role in that. So norms are distinct from attitudes because you can see them in how we actually behave. And particularly in the way we see others behave, the way we think others expect us to behave, and the ways that others think is kind of the proper or the correct behavior, and also what others think is a bad thing to do. And we can use social norms. I mean, we have to accept that they have a huge influence on us in not just landscaping, but probably everything we do. But we can actually use social norms to tell people, well, this is not what your neighbors think, or your neighbors, would encourage something else. So sometimes our social norms are based on false perceptions. A real common example is that college students believe the social norm, even if they're underage, the social norm is everybody's drinking all the time. And you change your behavior to adapt to that, and so you drink more just to fit in with what you think the social norm is. And it often turns out when we do the research that college students aren't drinking as much as everybody thinks. And if you informed them of the truth of what the real social norm is, what the actual behavior is, you can actually influence other people not to drink as much. So if we tell people what their neighbors are actually doing, to get them to imitate that, we could maybe reduce the amount of water or fertilizer that they, or chemical pesticides that they put on their lawn, by telling them what their neighbors are doing. So next slide. There's just another example. There's a lot of utilities who send out little flyers and reminders in their bills every month, showing how much energy you are using or how much water you're using, and then comparing you to your neighborhood, or comparing you to the other utility members. And sometimes we show that if your neighbors are using less energy, that you will kind of adapt your behavior and change and reduce your energy use, so you're more like your neighbors. Doesn't work for everybody, but in general, you can get a couple of percentage points change in how many individuals conserve energy, just by telling them, your neighbors are not using as much energy, and here's some things you could do so you're more like your neighbors. So next slide. So we've done a lot of research in Manatee County, particularly in a master plan development called Lakewood Ranch, and we've done focus groups and surveys, and we've talked to people, and this is some of the things that we've learned about and how social norms kind of manifest themselves. So in this neighborhood, homeowners really value their interaction with one another. They're often congregating, for cocktails and, out on the street. And there's a lot of talk about things like the landscape. So they really care what the neighbors think. There's a huge influence on what you believe your neighbors think about your lawn. This, not uncommon. There's a lot of restrictions in this particular neighborhood. And for the most part, homeowners, if you've bought into this, if you've signed the covenant, you believe in those restrictions. You expect your neighbors to follow those rules, and you're going to follow those rules yourself. And then there's pride in that. When your lawn looks nice, you feel good, and you think your neighbors also respect you for that. This particular neighborhood has a lot of stormwater ponds in the hundreds, and the wildlife that comes and visits this area is just amazing. I've seen wood storks and sandhill cranes, and they get eagles and they get otter and all sorts of things in these highly manicured backyard stormwater ponds. And that's a benefit that homeowners in this neighborhood really enjoy, and it's one reason they like living there. They all mention the amount of wildlife that they see in their backyards. Next slide. Thanks, Wendy. So to kind of appeal to that rule follower mentality. So this is a largely older retirement age community. It's not all like that, but it's majority of it. The residents are retirement age, upper income, white, highly educated, a lot of really successful business people who have been lucky enough to retire early. But they are rule followers. And I mean, that's part of their, I think their self-identity. Manatee County instituted a fertilizer ordinance a number of years ago. And this community actually puts out these signs, trying to think of the name of these, the shaving cream signs, where you see one after the other. And as you drive past it, you read each sign.
Burma.
What was that?
Burma shave.
The Burma shave sign. So it's a advertising technique to put these messages out in pieces. So we've every summer at the start of the fertilizer blackout period, they put these signs out in common areas and in the medians. And even though this community does not allow homeowners to put any signs in their yard whatsoever, the management association does put these in the common areas to inform people about the fertilizer ordinance. And this first one talks about grass clippings cause pond scum. So algae outbreaks are a real concern for people that are living on stormwater ponds, and we're trying to connect nutrients with the algal blooms that they don't like in their backyard. Also informing them that grass clippings contribute to that. There's really not a lot of knowledge that the grass clippings can be dangerous. We inform them that it's the law, it's Manatee County law. There's probably enforcement and fines, and I'll bet in 10 years nobody's ever been fined for violating the fertilizer ordinance. But nonetheless, that helps show that, well, this is the norm from our county. This is the norm that our neighbors believe in. The norm that we like our stormwater ponds kind of clear of algal blooms. We're appealing to all of these with these signs. So next slide, please, Wendy. So I think I mentioned these stormwater ponds in their backyards of not everybody's home. They're definitely visible throughout the neighborhood, and when you drive through it, you really notice the amount of them. But for those folks who live on a stormwater pond that have it in their backyard, they've actually paid a premium price. They've paid more for their home for this kind of waterfront view. And when the ponds are beautiful and the sky is blue and it reflects the sky, it really is a nice, what they call a viewscape. But the downside of that is when there's, the ponds are a filtering device. They're meant to collect, nutrients and pollutants from the whole stormwater system. So sometimes they go bad, and you get algae blooms. You get this kind of scum that forms on the surface. And homeowners that experience this in their particular ponds then have kind of the social norms really turn against them. And we did focus groups with people, particularly that had problem ponds, is what they called them. And they talked about how embarrassing it was, and the things that their neighbors said about their the things growing in their stormwater ponds. So again, as social change agents, which I think all of us in extension are to in one way or another, we can use those negative perceptions and kind of build off of those. So next slide. So here are some things that we can promote. If people would plant buffer zones around their ponds and plant more aquatic plants in the littoral zones. And as you can see, this is a typical backyard pond in Lakewood Ranch. There's a lot of turf to the shore, turf to the water's edge. There's also some areas where plants are growing. It looks like a lot of torpedo grass in there too, which is an issue. But we're promoting much larger buffer zones, and part of that is practical. If there's a buffer zone, it's really hard to get closer with grass clippings. It's hard to get closer with fertilizer overthrow from applications. So a buffer does provide a barrier. The buffer itself, of course, can also provide diversity in plants. It can help filter the water running off into the pond, provides habitat. There's a lot of benefits. So we attempt to educate homeowners, that a pond with a buffer around it can absorb nutrients, kind of prevent fertilizer from directly entering the pond. And it has just a lot of positive benefits, and some of those benefits are hard to see because they're going to be downstream. So if the water that's in your stormwater pond is cleaner, basically, when it goes downstream to the creeks and the rivers, and eventually, in this case, the Tampa Bay watershed, the water would be cleaner if we've planted buffer zones and if we've kept more of the nutrients and chemicals out of it. So next slide. And we're very specific about what we're telling people to do. So we, number one, we do promote that local fertilizer ordinance with its summer blackout. We do inform them about grass clippings. And as I mentioned, most people do not realize kind of the nutrient value of grass clippings and, you know, the potential of them to cause nutrient imbalances in waterways. And the years that we've been working in this community, I don't think I've ever seen a stormwater pond that wasn't full of grass clippings from the edge, or grass clippings that had come from through the drain, the in pipe, from everybody else's grass clippings in the street. And nobody realizes that that's a potential nutrient source. And then we're specific about those buffer zones, although we realize that's a pretty big landscaping change. And another thing is to encourage the planting of aquatic plants. And so all of these things are things that homeowners can talk to their HOA about, and their HOA will can install some of these things for them. Next one. And again, there was Wendy, we had talked earlier, if there are questions that you want me to address in the middle, I can stop.
Yeah. So Jenny says that her neighborhood just is so not receptive to receiving any BMP information. And along that, Steve wanted to know if you have tried to get Lakewood Ranch HOA management to institute a 10-foot shoreline buffer. So, you know, either one of those or both.
Yeah, and I'll talk about shoreline buffers in a little bit here, about the difficulty of them, because they're a pretty big landscaping change. So it's not an easy thing to do, and you really have to you do have to have buy-in from, usually in this case, all the neighbors that are backed up under that pond. So if there's 10 houses, all 10 houses would have to agree to it. Lakewood Ranch has gone kind of back and forth on this issue. They've then there's several HOAs within the management district. Some of them have prevented any changes to their stormwater ponds. Others have had problems with everything from erosion to algal blooms, and they're being much more proactive about planting buffer zones. So I think you have to work on a case-by-case basis. And again, I would focus on those neighborhoods that are actually having a problem with their ponds, or having maybe a problem they don't see if they don't realize the amount of nutrients that might be leaving the pond. So they're not, in the end, I'll give you some tips on how we can change behavior, but I realize these are not easy questions to answer. And well, as we move on, maybe you'll find some of your answers, and I'll return to those questions toward the end. So I just wanted to give you the Florida-friendly principles for managing waterways and stormwater ponds, the fertilizer appropriately, and Wendy, I'll skip to the next one real quick. The reduced stormwater runoff, which does mention grass clippings, fertilizer, and soil into the lawn so they don't get washed into storm drains. And then there's, of course, our picture of pond full of grass clippings. And number 9 is protect the waterfront. And this is the one that recommends the maintenance-free zone, removing invasives, exotic aquatic plants, and planting that buffer zone. So actually the maintenance-free is even more unpopular than the buffer zone, the planted buffer zone, because a maintenance-free zone usually just means high St. Augustine and torpedo grass. So that's not as popular as actually showing homeowners that you can plant a buffer zone, of colorful flowers and shrubs and even trees, and actually increase the kind of the value of your landscape, more so than just having turf to the water's edge. So next slide. So this is a common area. This is the community meeting center at Lakewood Ranch, where we actually did take the turf out of about 20% of the pond. This is actually they call it a lake, but it is a man-made. It's a man-made lake. I think it's when they built the development. This is where they mined lime rock, so it's fairly deep. But we took out a good bit of the turf and we planted it in native species with the help of Gail Hansen, designed it for us, and Michelle Atkinson is the extension agent in that county. And this was almost 10 years ago. I'm sorry, I don't know if I have a more recent picture of this, but this thing is really filled in and it's really nice. And whatever objections there were to the changes from turf to a diverse buffer zone, whatever objections there were initially have kind of gone away. And this is accepted, how this particular waterfront appears. So next slide. So there are some best practices for getting these people to do the right thing, and I realize it's not easy. It really takes collaboration with those who want to make changes, or people who are having some issues that we can solve. But we're very specific about what we tell them to do. So the fertilizer ordinance compliance, the grass clippings. And we also think about different audiences. So it might not just be the homeowner. Often these HOAs kind of subcontract all their work to HOA management companies. So maybe they're the ones that we have to work with. The homeowner leadership in a lot of these places will hire, sometimes they'll hire all of the landscape contractors. Individual homeowner doesn't do any of the hiring. And that's another avenue for where you can get changes. The homeowners that do hire contractors, again, this is another thing that we can talk to them about, particularly in keeping the clippings out of the water and out of the drains in the streets. This is something you can talk to with the contractors that are doing the work, as well as their employees. So we think, this is a homeowner problem. Yes, but there are different audiences that influence homeowners. And I would encourage you to think about all the different people that influence homeowner behavior. Next slide. And then we always emphasize the benefits. So you'll have a cleaner pond, and that's a relative term, but it's definitely a pond without as many nutrients. So fewer algal blooms, but also the diversity in planting will lead to more wildlife, and they're protecting the environment, just like they are with the fertilizer ordinance. They know that that's kind of a duty that they have to protect the environment. And we think about higher costs in the future, particularly with things, sometimes these ponds have to be redredged, and the soil and the accumulated chemicals in the bottom have to be removed. It can be very expensive. And erosion is more and more a problem as these communities age, and they see that the turf did a great job kind of holding the pond together for the first decade, but after the second decade, you see that maybe some more shrubs, more diverse plantings would do a better job as far as preventing erosion. And if a backyard stormwater pond starts to erode, it's going to keep creeping closer and closer to your home. So this is a real issue for people who live on stormwater ponds. Next slide. So again, recognize and attack the barriers to change. Realize that a change in established practices will probably require more involvement by your HOA. Homeowners are going to have to become more engaged in the issue. They're going to have to learn some things, and then they're going to have to do some things they didn't do in the past. They're going to have to think about grass clippings in the street and not ignore them anymore. And they're going to have to think about, well, my contractor, I've got a contract with him to perform these things. I can also hold them to certain standards as far as keeping nutrients out of our stormwater system. Next slide. So we did produce a flyer that we put into all of the homeowner orientation packets. We've also distributed it just to basically give people an idea that their stormwater ponds are collecting water from the entire neighborhood. And so everything is getting washed into them. And it's, it's basic kind of baseline information. It doesn't, we know that information alone won't change behavior, but we know that it's often the first step to behavior change. So next slide. And then, again, we restate all of the kind of goals that we have for folks about keeping stormwater clean, following the regulations, and then looking for some other ways to protect your ponds. Next slide. And these are some of the kind of educational and outreach activities that we've engaged with, largely with the help of Michelle Atkinson. But one thing was Saturday morning walkabouts with an extension agent, or in this case, anybody, master gardener, anybody expert in these issues, to take neighbors around to look at items like stormwater ponds, and to show them different examples of what works and what doesn't work, and to make sure that they understand the connectivity of what goes on in their neighborhood and in their front yard and in their street, and how that's connected to a pond in someone's backyard. And in this particular neighborhood, all of the ponds are connected by a gravity flow system, so they all end up in one place eventually. And I think it's the Braden Creek or the Braden River. So it just helps to actually be on the ground and to look at an infrastructure like a stormwater pond and explain to neighbors, that thing in your backyard is not just in your backyard. It connects you with all of your neighbors. We did the demonstration gardens. We've done a couple now, the one at the community center, and now we've done some other plantings in common areas. We had expert panels with landscape contractors and HOA members, the board members. We did a science cafe with residents, and also taken them to other neighborhoods when we can show them that there's an alternative. And sometimes you just need to see it, and sometimes you need to see that others have done things differently, and that gives you an example of what you can do in your own neighborhood. So next slide. And I know I'm getting close on time, and I think I'm getting close to the end of my slides too. And again, going back to where we start, we stress the norms of good neighbor behaviors and mutual responsibility. We realize they have signed these covenants to maintain their lawns in a certain way. And they all have that kind of mutual responsibility to one another and to the environment that they live in. Link things in the news when there's algae blooms, And when there's discussion of nutrient issues, you remind people that they're part of that problem too. We do frame this as solving problems by following the rules, and we do try to show how it can keep costs down in the future. Next slide. So kind of to sum this up, and this was this earlier question is, how do we do it? How do we get people to change when they don't want to do best management practices? Change comes at a lot of different levels, and it usually does not come at one level alone. It's hard to educate one person and have them say, aha, and I'm going to change. But if I use multiple levels, I'm going to be more successful. So if there are government mandates, such as fertilizer ordinance, but there's also district water management district mandates about stormwater ponds and about their functionality and whether they are functioning to remove, I think, 85% of the nutrients that are entering it. Of course, education and raising awareness as extension professionals, all of us are doing that as volunteers or otherwise. Finding technological solutions in a way. The buffer zone is a technological solution. It's entering and introducing new plants to help protect that pond. Improving the overall performance of the ponds, controlling nutrients at the source. And again, that's, you have to connect homeowners with the nutrients that they are applying into their landscape, whether directly through fertilizer or through grass clippings or through dog poop. And knowing that their individual behavior is a part of this problem and a part of the solution. And recognize again that turf grass and fertilizer, it's still, because it's the dominant landscape form, because so many homeowners kind of subcontract all of their work, all of their landscape work to a company. They're kind of separated from the fact that they're managing turf and applying fertilizers, and they don't really see themselves as part of the issue. But we really have to, I think, always reconnect them with their lawn and their environment. Next slide. How do you do it? Again, you really have to get community leaders on board. Next slide. And seek out partnerships. I think we partnered with the Garden Club to do this planting, as well as the managers that helped us with the site and the site prep. And you're, as master gardeners, you really are, you represent some of those partners, but there's there's scouts and there's science clubs and high schools and environmental groups. I would suggest that you try to bring as many of those as you can to bear on a particular problem. Don't try to do this alone. It's hard. Next slide. And knowing about this audience, I know it's difficult to conduct research, whereas that's what I do full time. I think that's fun, but I'm always open to working with master gardeners and extension agents around the state to collect data to find out how much your particular audience understands about an issue and whether they care about it, what they're currently doing. And if they have individual issues that they're looking to solve, maybe that's how we can frame this issue, whether it's ponds or water use or fertilizer use. So next slide. I think this is just a picture of our Protect Our Ponds Science Cafe. We had we limited the number of people that would attend. So we had an RSVP and said it would be limited. And that's what helped it sell out within a couple of days. People, they didn't want to miss it, and they showed up, and they really had a great time at this event. And there was science. We shared science with them. Next slide. So this is an example of changes that decision makers within Lakewood Ranch are now making. This is an experiment they're working with UF researchers, but they came to us and said, you know, we'd like to do more buffer plantings. Can you help us design them? Help us pick out the plants? And then our scientists are actually measuring the water quality of these ponds to see how it changes. And you can see just the difference just in a couple of years, both the aquatic and the shoreline plants that have been put into these particular ponds. I think we've got 6 of these in Lakewood Ranch now. So again, this is an example of applying science. And then eventually we would do the walkabouts. We would take neighbors and HOA decision makers out to these ponds to show them the difference and you know the reason you would want to make changes like this. Next slide. I don't know if we're down to 10 minutes. Maybe I should take questions, Wendy. But I just wanted, this last slide just shows you that I do realize behavior change is tough. And the reason it's tough is just because it's easier to keep doing the same thing over and over again, because there's a lot of fear and risk from change. And again, that change could be your pond, but it also could be cutting back on your water use, cutting back on the amount of turf that you have, reducing the amount of fertilizer. All of those changes, we can recommend them, but they don't come without risk. And we have to kind of address those fears and their perceptions of risk by homeowners. And that big fear of what will my neighbors think. So we're always cognizant of that.
Really good. Thank you, Paul. We do have some questions to go through, so I'm going to kind of jump right into them. But thank you for that excellent presentation and kind of that different twist on that information. Oh, I'll turn my screen back on so everybody can see me. So our first question that I'd like to throw at you is, are there any publications from the university about planting around ponds? I know that there's the Florida friendly plants for stormwater shorelines. Do you know of any others?
I do. I would go to IFAS. We have a fairly comprehensive document about stormwater ponds. It addresses a lot of these issues as well as some of the planting things. I believe that Basil Iannone and AJ Reisinger have produced some IFAS documents and some catalogs of plants for stormwater ponds, both aquatic and shoreline. So
using stormwater pond as your search in IFAS is going to bring it up. But the one that Kathleen posted in the chat box, Florida friendly plants for stormwater pond shorelines, has a plant list that will choke a horse. Yes. It is very, very extensive. So check that one out. Okay. As far as the grass clipping rule, does that include leaves from trees? Do you know?
You know, I am in the ordinance from Manatee County does not say anything about leaves, and that is a source of nutrients. In fact, it's a significant source. But I think it would be one more reason to keep, you know, to mulch leaves on your property and keep them out of the storm drains.
Okay. Our Gloria says our HOA sprays our lake, which some of us decline. So they say, Gloria and her friends say, don't spray my zone. But what can she tell others? And I think some of the information you presented would be good, but is there, what would you say if she had like an elevator speech to give her neighbors about that?
Yeah, and the one thing that I think to remember is that they are living systems. So the algae in there is doing its job when it's eating the nutrients and taking them up. When you spray them, usually it kills everything. So it really sets back the kind of the function of the pond. It might look better for a while, but overall, you really want the algae to be eating those nutrients.
Right.
And
But now algae's not super sexy, Paul, but shoreline birds are.
there you go.
Birds are and ducks are, and so I probably, Gloria, would go with that. We like to see the birds, we like to see the creatures, and so therefore, this is why we do that. So that might be a way to go at that. A couple of folks are asking for flyer availability, and so Paul, that flyer you showed, maybe I could get that from Michelle Atkinson.
Yes, check with her. I might have it in my files somewhere, a PDF of that we could send out and reprint. I'll take a look for that.
We could post it along with the recording of this webinar. So that I think I'd like to do that. So if you can get your hands on it, if you can look for that, that would be great for us. Nancy asked, what if the city owns the retention pond? How do we get them to help?
We are working with Manatee County on some property around their new convention center. And they do want to plant their ponds both in kind of a manicured way and a much more natural way, and compare the outcomes of it. So again, going back to what's the benefit for them for cities and municipalities, long-term maintenance cost might be reduced, greater wildlife, greater kind of public areas that are a little wilder. So you can definitely work with your local decision makers to get them to see that there's an alternative to turf to the water line. And again, I think there's enough examples out there. If you find other master plan communities or other cities that are doing this, there's examples where you can go and look and see how it worked for them. But things are starting to change, and I think the mindset about stormwater ponds is starting to change slowly.
Right, for them to be really thought of as a system.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. We do have somebody who asked about the French drain. I'm not sure if you know about French drains, Paul.
I've learned more about stormwater ponds than I ever thought I would. And I have heard of French drains. Yeah, that escapes me the function of them. But we've learned about bubblers and fountains and dyes, all sorts of different things people are using.
Great. And so I'll ask you, do you think the perceptions and the opinions of Lakewood Ranch are really, you're seeing a shift of magnitude there?
I'm not sure of magnitude, but you're definitely seeing a shift. There are examples of where things have changed and people have come to accept them. They are now constructing in their new areas. They're doing a lot less of the turf to the shore. So the developer starting, before anybody buys a home, the developers are starting to modify what the stormwater ponds will look like. So if you move in and it's already planted, with a diverse landscape, that becomes your norm and you accept that. So there is some change, and the work they've done with the UF now for almost a decade, I think, shows they're looking to solve some of their problems. Right.
Well, Paul, I really appreciate you being with the Master Gardeners. We had a lot of engagement. We had over 100 people with us here today. And I am going to put the IFAS document, paste that EDIS document in the chat box one more time. And so everyone can see that, or you can just go to EDIS and search stormwater pond information or just stormwater ponds. And then you're going to get those plant lists that come up. And then your extension agent, and should you have a Florida-friendly landscape agent, would be able to share and visit with you some of local examples of people doing the right thing, areas doing the right thing, and for you to get more localized photos of that to enhance your conversation with an HOA or conversation with stakeholders, as well if you were doing any courses or classes or demonstrations of this as well. So Marty wants to know how long.
Reach out to me too.
Well, and yeah, send them to Paul too.
send me an email and we can talk.
Okay. All right. Very good. Thank you all. The French drain conversation continues and I'll let you all pick that up. But Paul, we'll see you next time and thank you and have a very happy Thanksgiving.
Well, thanks everybody
All right.
for attending.
Okay. Very good. Thank you so much, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.